Hey guys, it's Timothy here. So in case you haven't noticed, Shadows over Innistrad is in full spoiler season right now, and I am impressed with what I've seen. Usually the first big batch of spoilers gives us all of the new mechanics that we're going to have, and it looks like they've spoiled pretty much everything we have to look forward to as far as new mechanics and returning mechanics go. I could be wrong, there could be something here. Notably, Investigate is not in this set right now, or at least there are no cards with Investigate, so all of our clue-based strategies and draft and sealed are going to get much, much worse, which is kind of disappointing because Investigate was great. Also, I haven't seen any cards with Skulk on them. I know Skulk was being tested to potentially be an evergreen mechanic, but I don't think it got very good reviews. But anyway, we're going to look through all of the spoilers today. It's 4:12 Eastern time, so there are probably going to be plenty of extra spoilers after this moving forward in the day, but I'm going to go up to the most recent spoiler I've seen, which is Thalia's Lancers, and I'm just going to talk through these very quickly. Thalia's Lancers is a 5-mana, double white, first striker, a 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, not when you cast it, but when it enters the battlefield, you get to search you get to search your library for any legendary card and put it into your hand. So it tutors for a legendary card, not just a legendary creature, and we know that white is swarming with legendary creatures right now. I don't know what it is about white, but they've just given white everything in this set, in the last set. But anyway, Thalia's Lancers goes and searches for your Thalias, it goes and searches for your Avacyn's, your Brunas, your Giselle. It doesn't even have to get a creature. It can go get like Pyromancer's Goggles, or I don't know, is there a legendary land in Standard right now? Tamio's Journal, things like that. Just if it has the word legendary on it, you can go grab it. Obviously, very good body, so good limited card, and if you have at least one other legendary, it's just fantastic. First pickable rare. Maybe not super busted because it is a 4/4, but first strike is huge. First strike is really huge, so that card, pretty impressive. The next card here, Blessed Alliance, is going to show off the escalate mechanic, so get your Anchorman quotes ready because they escalate quickly. So Blessed Alliance, the way this works is you cast, it's kind of like a charm, you cast the spell, so 2 mana here, and you get to choose one of these effects, but you can actually pay 2 extra mana for each additional effect. No, you can't use the same effect more than once or anything like that, so you can't just mana sink it, but you get to choose to either gain 4 life, don't care about that, or untap 2 creatures, or target opponent sacks an attacking creature. That last one's the best one, but when you can pay 2 additional mana to untap 2 of your creatures, or use the life gain as an additional thing, I think it becomes that much better. So Escalate seems like a really cool mechanic. These modal spells are already pretty good, and obviously each individual one is not really worth a card, but when you're using them together, and you can use this as kind of an early game card that escalates into the late game, it gets much, much better. There's only one other example so far, but it reminds me a lot of Strive, where you can pay extra mana to increase the effects. You're not picking new targets, though, you're just picking new effects. Gain in life is not particularly good, and it's not usually worth a card, but when you can tack it on to another ability, it becomes that much better. So I really like this card, and I think that last ability is what really pushes. I think that's what you're going to use most of the time, followed by the second one, followed by the last one. And if you ever pop up all 3 abilities for 6 mana, it becomes a pretty good card. It is an uncommon. Bruna, so we're going to have to talk about Meld. Meld is really interesting. It's kind of like a variant of Transform. So let's look at Bruna first. It's worth noting that Bracella here is on the back side of Bruna. It's, well, half of it. We'll talk about it. It's very interesting. So Bruna is 7 mana for a legendary Angel Horror. When you cast her, you can return target angel or human from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it reanimates humans or angels. They can reanimate Avacyn's. Pretty crazy. This obviously will go very hand-in-hand with Gisela, which we'll see here in a second. It's a flying, vigilant 5/7, so not super impressive on its own. It obviously needs help. It needs other cards to go with it to make this one really good. Bracella we'll talk about in a second, because only half of Bracella is on the back of Bruna. We have to see Gisela before we see exactly how Meld works. So we're going to go ahead and look at Gisela next. Gisela the Broken Blade. This is a 4 mana mythic. Notice that Bruna was actually a rare. Gisela is a mythic. Not that it matters. You're probably not going to get them together in draft anyway, but You have, again, a legendary Angel Horror, a 4-mana 4/3 with Flying, First Strike, and Lifelink, which, from my experience, will probably end the game on its own right there. It's just brutal, but the way Meld works is like this. So at the beginning of your end step, if you both own and control Gisela the Broken Blade and a creature named Bruna the Fading Light, exile them, then meld them into Brisela, Voice of Nightmare. So this Brisela card, half of it, you'll notice there's this line that goes halfway between it. That's because it's not its own individual card. Each half of this is on the back of one of those two cards. So the top half is probably on the back of the... I have no idea. Probably it's on the back of one of them, and the bottom half is on the back of the other. And the way it'll work is if Gisela's ability triggers and you have both Gisela and Bruna on the battlefield, you'll exile them when it says so. So on the end step, you'll take Gisela and Bruna, you'll exile both of them, and then you'll put them both back onto the battlefield on their flip sides, and each half will go together to make Brisela, Voice of Nightmare. So it's one whole card, but it's split between the back halves of two cards. So you'll have just this giant card on the battlefield. It's really wonky, but then it's just treated as a normal creature. It's treated as its own individual creature, so it's no longer Gisela or Bruna. It's Brisela. Silly name, but... really interesting. There are only 3 Meld cards in the entire Shadows over Innistrad set, and we've already seen, Eldritch Moon set, and we've already seen all 3 of them, so there are no more surprises there. They're just kind of testing the waters with it. But Brisela, once you have your Gisela and your Bruna, and they successfully flip into Brisela, you get this 9/10 with Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink. And your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana cost 3 or less. So I don't see this being played really in Modern or Legacy. It's just very wonky. But it's game over in those formats. Mana cost 3 or less, can't cast spells. Everything in those formats is 3 or less. So goodbye. I hope you have Damnation in your deck. Anyway, 9/10 with all those keywords is going to win the game anyway, regardless of the abilities. But it's not indestructible, it's not Hexproof. You can still kill it with like a Wrath or a 4 mana plus spell. But the interesting thing here is that both the angels work together very nicely. Bruna can get back Gisela from the graveyard. I think that was designed deliberately to be that way. When you play Bruna, you can reanimate an angel from your graveyard, get back Gisela. Another card I want to point out is Ever After. Card that hasn't really seen its place yet, but that can get back 2 creatures from your graveyard at once. So if you somehow play this Reanimator style deck where you can toss these angels in the graveyard, then you play Ever After, you getting back Gisela and Bruna, and then if they survive till the end step, you have this thing on the battlefield, and it is hard to deal with. It will win the game eventually. Very difficult. You can't Declaration Stone, you can't Anguish Unmake, and they're 3 or less. But pretty crazy. Meld seems really just kind of weird. I like the idea of it. I don't know, like, the mechanics of it and the whole, like, having this one big creature divided between 2 cards when it goes to tapping it. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I am a little disappointed there are only 3 Meld cards. Anyway, we talked a lot about those. Let's go ahead. We have a common here that confirms zombies are going to be a thing, which we already knew zombies were going to be, you know, all the tribal stuff's coming back. So 2 mana sorcery, Cemetery Recruitment, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a zombie card, draw a card. So this is probably limited to limited, no pun intended. It's not very good in Standard. There are better ways to draw cards, but it's kind of like a Gravedigger that draws you an extra card. So it's a nice little 2-for-1 if you're playing a zombie deck, and it's pretty awful if you're not. I wouldn't play this outside of a really dedicated zombie deck. And I'm hoping zombies really get some extra treatment in this set, especially for limited, because they're pretty terrible in Shadows over Innistrad, so they really need the help. Cards like this really push it to where it needs to be. Gnarlwood Dryad, very interesting, kind of like Nimble Mongoose card. But anyway, 1/1 with Death Touch, Dryad Horror. It's an uncommon because Sedge Scorpion type card. 1/1 Death Touches make games last way longer than they need to. If you never played Theros Block where there was like 15 billion Death Touch creatures, then, you know, get used to it. Anyway, Delirium's coming back, and this card says it gets +2/+2 when you have 4 different card types in your graveyard. Not bad. A card that can hold down the early game, and a card that scales a little bit later into the late game. Obviously, if you're not dedicated Delirium, this card is a little bit worse, but its base 1/1 Death Touch for 1 is still a good card. It's going to trade up most of the time, and it's going to eat like removal spell. It's a much better card than Rancid Rats, in my opinion. if you're looking for a Death Touch type card, and I think it's solid. I would pick up at least 1 or 2 of these, even if I wasn't Delirium, and they get a little bit better in Delirium decks. Still not busted or anything, but very good cards. Chill and Grasp, confirming that Madness will be back. Don't think anybody was super surprised about that one. But we have a 3-mana instant, Madness for 4. These cards with higher Madness costs than their converted mana costs don't often get played. I think, like Broken Concentration, I've never seen that card get Madness, but at instant speed, you tap 2. You're freezing 2 creatures. Tap 2 creatures down. They don't untap during their next untap step. Cripple and Chill is the same thing for 1 creature, but you draw a card, and there was a Surge variant in Oath of the Gatewatch. These cards are normally very good, but they're better in tempo-style decks where you're attacking a lot, so white-blue, white-red, or, I'm sorry, white-blue or red-blue, where you have these early-game creatures, and you can keep your opponent off of blockers for a good number of turns. Just using this defensively is okay, but not as good, especially since it doesn't draw you a card. Madness on it is just extra text, basically, but if you ever get to Madness this out with, like, I don't know, Reckless Scholar, Mad Prophet seems very good. I would draft this card, and it is uncommon. Usually those sorts of effects that tap 2 creatures either let you draw a card for a cheaper amount, or they cost more mana and you have an additional effect. That 3 mana seems pretty nice. Alright, so Transform is coming back, and to nobody's surprise, we have an artifact here to kind of show us what Transform cards will look like in this set. So, Cryptolith Fragment enters the battlefield tapped. It's 3 mana. It's a mana rock that comes in tapped, but it's an interesting mana rock. It taps to add any mana to your mana pool, then each player loses a life. So you lose a life and your opponent loses a life. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if each player, not just your opponent, if each player, including yourself, has 10 or less life, you transform Cryptolith Fragment into Aura of Emrakul. This is an Eldrazi Reflection. Reflection's a really interesting creature type here. I think there are a couple other cards that reference Reflections, I'm not sure, but you have a Flying Death Touch 1/4. It's just a weird combination of things. And it says whenever Aura of Emrakul attacks, each opponent loses 3 life. So you're getting in there for 4. You're automatically getting in there. You're basically bolting your opponent every time you attack with this. They can't do anything about that. And then you have that extra 1 coming in. So this is a very, very quick clock on your opponent. Cryptolith Fragment will bring them down. They're already at 10 or less, so they have 3 turns maybe to survive this thing. It has Death Touch, so it gets through flyers pretty easily. Those big blockers like the 1/5 flyer or the 3/3 Flash Spirit, things like that. This just gets through them, and they're still losing life. And it adds mana, it ramps you ahead a little bit. It does hurt you too, so it's the type of card that is a little bit worse when you're racing. But actually, if you manage to flip it in time, it can actually push you ahead in the race. 3 damage off just attacking is great. I didn't like Silent Skimmer very much, the Battle for Zendikar card, that the 0/4 flyer that hits for 2 when it attacks. But this card seems much better if you can reliably flip it. You do have to get your opponent below 10, so you know, while also being below 10 yourself, so there's a little bit of risk to it, but I think it's an interesting, unique card. Dawngryph here, where I'm not even going to click it, it's just well, I will click it. It's a Hippogriff. Sure, why not? It's just a Windrake, 2/2 flyer for 3. Those cards are usually pretty good. I haven't seen a format where a Windrake is just straight out bad. So we already have Spectral, Shepherd, or whatever. Same thing with upside. This doesn't have any upside. It's just a Hippogriff, and it doesn't have any relevant creature types, but it is still a decent curve filler, and you'll play it a lot of times. It's hard to cut unless you're just full on 3 drops. Wretched Gryph, an Eldrazi Hippogriff. Get your Hippogriff tribal ready. But this one has nothing to do with the last card, interestingly enough. Anyway, this is a 3/4 for 7. When you cast it, you draw a card, and it flies. So that's the base card, but it has another one of our new mechanics here, Emerge. Emerge is really interesting. So, Emerge is an alternative casting cost. In this case, it's 5 and a blue. That doesn't really, this isn't a blue creature. It does have blue color identity for EDH purposes, but it's not a blue creature. But the way Emerge works is you may cast this spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. So if you're using the Emerge cost, you're ignoring the 7 up here, even though the mana cost of this card, the converted mana cost of this card is still 7. But say I sacrifice a 3-drop creature, it doesn't matter what colors, this isn't going to reduce the colored cost, only the generic cost. If I sacrifice a 3-drop creature, it reduces the emerge cost by 3, making it 2 and a blue, and I can essentially cast this card for 2 and a blue. I do have to have a creature to sacrifice in order to use this emerge. If I don't have a creature on the battlefield, I can't emerge. I do have to sacrifice a creature, and it will reduce the cost. So essentially, if you play a 3-drop on turn 3 and then you try to play this on turn 4, you can emerge it and sacrifice your 3-drop creature, reduce the cost by 3, and cast this for 3, in which case it becomes an extremely good card. 3/4 flyer that draws you an extra card, so it makes up for the card disadvantage by sacrificing. Very interesting. I think this card is solid. If you're casting it straight up for 7, you're probably doing it wrong, but this card seems pretty strong, and I'm super excited to see how Emerge works out. This is a common as well, and one thing I want to notice on this card, the collector number is 12, and this is a colorless card, so there's at least that many colorless creatures in this set. We've already seen a couple, but all of the cards before this are colorless creatures as well, so I don't know if Emerge is going to be tied strictly to Eldrazi cards or whatever, but this is a nice little look at what we can expect from the rest of the set. Moving on, we have another Escalate card, Borrowed Malevolence. Its base ability is for 1 black at instant speed. You can either give a creature +1/+1 or give a creature -1/-1, or you can escalate for 2. So for 3 mana, you can do both of these effects. This seems like a filler card to me. It also seems like a card that's deceptively good in certain matchups. If you can ever 2-for-1 with it, it's amazing, where you -1 a creature and then you win a combat with the +1. But just using this as like a -1/-1 type effect makes it a little bit pretty similar to like an instant speed deadweight on certain types of creatures, but I don't think this card is super powerful. I wouldn't go crazy and draft multiples of them, but having one of them seems pretty nice and limited. Long Road Home is 2 mana instant. Exile target creature, any creature, not just yours. Beginning of the next end step, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it. So a lot like Essence Flux, but you get the 1/1 counter regardless of whether or not it's a spirit, so it's a little bit better than Essence Flux. This can also blink out your opponent's creatures, even though if you choose to get rid of your opponent's creature as like a blocker for the turn, it will come back in with a 1/1 counter. This is also pretty good against threaten type effects, like the one that Malevolent Whispers. If they steal your creature, you can actually exile it, get it back, and it gets a little bit stronger. I think this is Otherworldly Journey. I think this might be a functional reprint of Otherworldly Journey, although that might have been an arcane spell, but very nice. I like blink effects. I like Essence Flux a lot more than most people do, so I think this card's pretty nice, and I think Uncommon's a good spot for it. Moving on, we have that card that everybody was wondering about. So we've already seen the Writhing Township. I have a different video on that if you want to go check it out. But the card that this starts off as is Handwear Battlements. Notice this is not a legendary land, it's just a regular land, but it is a rare, and it's tied to red basically, so you can actually expect to get past this in some amount of drafts because non-red players don't have a use for it. At any rate, for red, you can tap it to give a creature haste for the turn. Not bad. You wouldn't normally play an effect like that, I don't think. I think some people value the haste more than they should, but decent little effect. And then for 5 mana, 3 red, you can tap it, and if you control Handwear Battlements plus the next card we're going to see, Handwear Garrison, you exile them and then meld them together. So Handwear the Writhing Township is actually 2 separate cards melded together, one of which is a land, which is difficult to remove, so you can reliably get these 2 cards together. The fact that it's rare makes it kind of a little annoying because the you'll see here the other half of the card itself is rare. Let's look at that one, Handwear Garrison. This card is actually just very good on its own. So 2 in a red, you get a 2/3 human soldier creature, and whenever it attacks, you put 2 1/1 red human creatures onto the battlefield tapped and attack. And very nice card on its own, very aggressive. The first time it attacks, you've essentially gotten a 4/5 for 3. And then if they don't have an answer for it, or they can only deal with maybe one of the tokens per turn, this escalates, gets out of hand very quickly. No pun on escalates, I guess I gotta watch that. But essentially, if you have the garrison plus you have the battlements on the battlefield, the land, you can pay that 5 mana, exile this creature plus the land, and then it flips up into the Rythen Township. In limited, that should be game over most of the time. You're just smashing for so much damage. We already talked about the Township, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but it does have haste. That's because you're exiling those 2 creatures off the battlefield, and then Handwear will come back in to the battlefield. But this just does so much damage. 7 damage by itself plus 2 tapped 3/2s that are already attacking every time it attacks. If you can back this up with protection of some sort, it's game over very, very quickly. Now, with Bruna and Gisela, you're never going to get those in draft because one's mythic, one's rare, and they're both good on their own. This I could see happening. If you manage to open up a garrison very early, you could possibly pick up one of the lands. The lands are pretty useless outside of red decks, so I can see a lot of people passing this. Maybe not in the early stages of draft where people are really excited to try this out. But this card is not good outside of red decks, so a lot of people who aren't playing red could pass this card. If you have the garrison already, you could get rewarded. It is a small set, and there will be 2 packs, so you might be able to do it. At any rate, one more card here. We have the 3rd Meld card. Remember, there are only 3 Meld cards in this set. We saw this one last night. It was spoiled on Reddit. Let me go ahead and plug in so we don't disconnect. But the card that we're starting with here is Midnight Scavengers. It's a 5 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So Gravedigger for 3 mana cards. And the card it goes with is Graph Rats. This is the card that actually triggers the meld. It's just a 2/1 vanilla creature for 2, nothing exciting. But it says at the beginning of combat, notice this one's on combat, not on end step. If you own this creature plus the previous creature we just saw, you exile them and then you meld them into Chitter and Host. Again, half of this card is on each side. It has haste, so it can attack once it comes back in, and it's on the beginning of combat, so it should be coming in fresh new creature. Has menace, so it's hard to block, and then it says when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace till end of turn. So in a really aggressive black-based deck, this is a very strong card. You do have to have the rats and the other guy, but just like Gisela and Bruna, the Scavengers works very nicely with the rats. You can put the rats out early, trade it for an early drop, and then the Scavenger's ability will actually let you get the rats back. The same way Bruna will help you get Gisela back from your graveyard. So I think they designed these cards really nicely. I'm a little disappointed that we won't be seeing any other Meld cards spoiled. It's just Handwear, Chitter and Host, and Bruce, whatever, Jill Bruna, Bracella, whatever. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys, first off, think about Investigate not returning. From a flavor perspective, it makes sense, but I'm a little disappointed. Let me know what you think about Melding, and if you're excited for it or you think it's just going to be a hassle. And any other thoughts you have at all about this set so far. It's pretty exciting. What are you looking forward to? What do you want most from the set? And stay tuned. I'm going to be checking out these spoilers pretty much on a day-to-day basis, and probably putting up videos like this. So if you like the videos, give them a thumbs up. If you don't like them, give them a thumbs down. Give me some feedback. I'm open to it. At any rate, I'm impressed with what I've seen so far, and I hope to hear from you guys in the comments below. So remember, like, comment, subscribe. My name is Timothy, and I will see you guys next time.